accessed the podcast of OA. Located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will, the podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lantern Myron Rumsey, the podcast of OA begins now.
Hey Green Lantern fans, you're listening to the podcast of OA, episode number 206. I'm Myron Rumsey and joined by my good friend Phil Bova. Phil, my friend, it is March.
It is. It is. The weather's going to start changing soon. We got some kind of snow junk coming in tomorrow. I don't know, like 1 to 2 inches, some winter storm thing. And it's like, oh my God. And just the other day it was like 70-something degrees. And we were outside in the backyard playing. Jeez.
Yeah, it was 70 degrees here over the weekend. And then we had a winter snow warning. We were expecting 7 to 9 inches. And then today it was in the 40s. So what we got yesterday all melted. So we have this real Jekyll and Hyde weather pattern going on from day to day.
I think the common person needs to realize that Mother Nature is not happy with our planet.
It's just crazy.
We need OA.
Yeah.
Mogo.
Really? Yeah. Wouldn't it be nice to have Mogo where you could say, Mogo, make it this climate?
Weird.
That would be nice. Make it rain when you want it to,
It would. And he could take us anywhere we want because it'd be a contained environment.
That's right. That's right. Well, normally before we start talking about books, we usually talk about news, but there really isn't any news. The only news is the lack of news. Yeah. And the fact that, here we are, March 1st was supposed to be the last issue of this current run of Green Lantern. Green Lantern number 12 was supposed to be out March 1st, and it's been pushed back to April 12th. And there are no books solicited for April or May. So who knows what's going on? It's interesting. I was looking at the April 12th date. I was like, why did they move it back that far? Because the book's been done. According to Jeff Thorne, they were like, are there rewrites because of Dark Crisis? And he said, no, the script's been done and turned in quite a while ago. And the April 12th date is just 1 week before the death of the Justice League. So I don't know whether they're holding it intentionally for that or what the reason is. It's also interesting. Thorne is not talking about whether or not he's continuing with the book. He's been asked a bunch of times, and he's basically saying, I can't comment until DC says what they're going to do. He's waiting more for an official thing. But Marco Santucci, who has been one of the artists in the book, has talked about issue 12 as being the series finale. So, again, who knows?
Yeah. That dude would be saying something if he was going to be going further on this book. I bet you he's not saying anything because he's not going to be going any further on this book.
That's my hunch. I mean, there's been rumors. There have been rumors about Tom King doing a book, and there's just been all kinds of rumors, and it's hard to say. We don't know whether did DC decide to continue, but they made the decision late, so they need time for Thorne and whatever the creative team is going to be, because Santucci said he's working on other projects now. So do they need time to spin up a next issue? So that's why they're spacing things out? Or is it going to be a complete relaunch? Is it going to be a new creative team? We really don't know. I mean, what we do know, the only facts we really know is that Jeff Thorne had 3 arcs kind of plotted out, but he was only contracted to write 12 issues, and he's getting his 12 issues. Beyond that, there are really no facts. The only other fact is that Marco Santucci said issue 12 is the end of the series. But how much does he really know? Who knows?
End of the series could be one thing. They could start the next, I guess you could call it series, with the same writer if you want.
Right.
And it's not really validation or not validating anything.
Right. If you look at the whole Grant Morrison run, it was done in seasons. So is it the same kind of idea? Who knows?
Right. And at the same time, it's like when it comes to DC, this goes to the root of the problem I have with these people. They don't, I don't know. I just felt like they used to have a better vision and a better grasp on, and when I say vision, I use vision in a sense of the word that they know where they want to go with things in advance, right? You're talking a year or two. Right. But the problem with DC is they always have to reshuffle. It always comes down to the reshuffling they do it all the time.
Yeah, like, it's really gotten to be a broken record with them, and it's interesting because there was all this pushback on 5G, and supposedly that's what led to Dan Didio's being let go by DC Comics. But it looks like with every passing day, with every group of solicitations, it seems like this is where DC's going anyway. Josh Williamson is doing this whole new Justice League thing, and it looks just like the future state Justice League, which is what 5G was going to be. So I don't have a lot of faith in the company right now. I don't feel like there is any real leadership.
No, that's what I was saying. I don't have anybody with. I just feel like they don't have anybody with vision, or they get caught in these instances, and this is going to bring up, the whole movie industry. When you have a reshuffling of all these big movies that people are expecting, I understand that things happen, and they're valuable things that need to happen to get this out to the public. Just to be sure that you've put your best out there. When it comes to the special effects reshoots, or giving more ample time to the Flash and stuff. But at the same time, it's kind of curious that the Batman comes out and it's a huge hit, and then all of a sudden, immediately following that, things get shuffled about. Man, they're just like anything else, man. The Batman, they jump on that train, and next thing you know, like the day after that, there's going to be a Penguin series starting on HBO Max. It's like, here we go.
Well,
we're going to have everything. Gotham, everything.
There's this history that Warner Brothers and DC both have, where if something does well, suddenly everything else has to be like that, because they think that's the formula for success. So did the reaction to the Batman is like, oh, wait a minute, we need to change all these movies we were working on? Gosh, I hope that's not the case.
That's what I feel like happened, though. It's like I understand, and I've heard nothing but great things. And you know what? To be quite honest with you, everybody out there listening, I want to see it. I'm really curious to see how they do with it. It looks really, really good. And while I am not a huge fan of Robert, is it Pattinson?
Pattinson, yeah.
Pattinson, right. I actually have a lot of faith that he's going to take this in a new direction for DC, and I hope that it does for them, and that way they can distance themselves from Affleck and everything. But it's time to move on from that, and I hope that this character does that, and it looks cool. I want to see it.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard not to get excited about seeing any DC character on the screen, even if it's not one that you're emotionally invested in. Because it's
everybody
comics.
Knows. I rail on that dude all the time. I hate him, and I still want to see the movie. You can't call me too much of a non-fan when I'm going to see something that I'm a non-fan of, right? I mean,
I think you're just vocal about a lot of things that a lot of fans feel but don't express. I mean, to me, I feel like I'm oversaturated with Batman.
Yeah, that's what I feel like. I feel like it's just raining Batman all the time. As a matter of fact, every time I check it's comic book day. No, it's not. Batman day.
Well, it's true, because it feels like like when I hear a Batman announcement, I don't get excited about it because I know it's going to be more Batman, right? I don't get excited about it, but it doesn't mean I'm not interested in it, but I don't have any enthusiasm for it. Whereas if you're telling me there's going to be another Shazam movie, I'm genuinely excited for that because it's something different and exciting. Mm-hmm. It's just the way I feel. And I'm sure you probably feel the same way. We've been Batmaned to death.
Yeah, man. It seems like the Batman train's been circling this planet for a long time. But enough about that. I want to do with some Green Lantern.
That's right. So originally I was hoping to record and talk about issues 11 and 12 and round out the series and have some information as to where we're going. But since we're not going to have the last issue until next month, we might as well talk about Green Lantern number 11, get that out of the way. And we have a whole bunch of listener feedback to get caught up on, because when you and I did our special Valentine's Day episode on Carol Ferris, we decided not to do the listener feedback. So we've kind of got a backlog, and as it is, we won't get through all of it, but we've got a pretty sizable chunk of listener feedback and responses to past episodes to go through. So I'm excited to talk about the book. I think people might be surprised with my commentary on this issue. And I'm interested to see and listen to what some of our fellow listeners have to say and a couple questions they might have for us.
All right.
So with that said, we'll take a break and we will come back with a Know Your Core segment, and then we'll start talking about Green Lantern number 11.
My name is John Mayo.
And I'm Bob Retall.
What is the Weekly Comics Spotlight?
Comics reviews from two fans with 65 years of combined comics reading experience,
Who each get and read well over 100 different comics each month from Marvel, DC, and a wide variety of independent publishers.
reviews that highlight books that may not hit everyone's radar screen since most people don't buy so many different comics each month.
Reviews with honest opinions. We enjoy comics but realize not every issue that we read is a solid gold masterpiece. All in about 30 minutes. So please check out the Weekly Comics Spotlight at www.comicbookpage.com/podcast.
Hello, fellow Owens. Welcome back to another Know Your Core segment. This week, we have an interesting one and a one and done. And he goes by the name of Alluvus, a Green Lantern which was killed during the first destruction of the central power battery. When Alluvus attempted to use his ring to stop a prison break on Oa, the failing battery caused his ring to explode, killing this poor Green Lantern. Alluvus' creators are Steve Englehart and Gil Kane. Sadly, his first appearance was the Green Lantern Corps number 223, The Last Testament of the Green Lantern Corps. Unfortunately, he died in the Green Lantern Corps number 223, The Last Testament of the Green Lantern Corps. You will be missed, Alluvus. Carry on, friend. And there you have it.
Listen up, all you white circles. This is Drill Instructor Kilowog, and you're listening to the podcast of Oa. And don't you forget it, boozers.
Well, Phil, that had to be the shortest Know Your Core segment in known history, because poor Alluvus, he lived and died in one issue, and never heard from again.
Yeah, and I don't even think he did anything noteworthy, the poor guy. You know, it's like the ring chose him. I mean, it's like almost like the ring chose him to die. Poor thing. Let's carry on, friends. Jeff Thorne, the great issue number 11, huh?
So my surprising commentary is I felt this was the best issue of the series so far.
Okay, I won't argue that point. Off mic, I made a comment, but since you said that, it makes sense now. And I will say that, yes, it was the lesser of the evils. Right.
I was going to say, it's the best issue of the series, but the bar was set really, really low so far for the previous 10 issues. But I digress. It's interesting. First of all, I did love the cover with Hal on the cover. That was cool. That might sell a few more issues, hopefully, but we'll see. But this issue kind of ties the two plots back together. John comes back and merges with the Joe Mullane plot on Oa, and it's really one big giant fight with we see Iridian and Koyos taking on the forces of the Guardians, the Justice League, Hal, Joe Mullane, the United Order, and the Green Iron Man Corps, all in one giant battle. And they're losing the battle until John shows up and he's all hulked out with his Godstorm energy.
Easy way to put it.
Yeah, and there were some interesting moments. It's funny because I think people, Hal Jordan fans in particular, were interested in seeing how Jeff Thorne was going to write Hal, knowing Jeff Thorne's history of basically saying he thinks the character's garbage and he's cardboard and so on. And Jeff Thorne kind of wrote him like cardboard, quite frankly. He's there, but didn't really do much. Obviously, he was there in the fight. He kind of gives him an idea for a battle plan. I thought it was interesting when they get to a point where both Joe and Hal lose their rings. They go to use Kelly's gauntlet, and Hal doesn't seem to recognize that gauntlet because he has a lot of familiarity with the gauntlet. It looks an awful lot like that one. I kind of thought it would have made sense for him to have wielded the gauntlet, but again, Joe Mullane is the co-star of this book, so she's the one that's going to get the call here to do that. Right. Early on though, there was something really interesting that happened. You see some energy coming out from Koyos and reaching out to a number of different worlds as he's kind of combining magic and the emotional spectrum and anti-chaos energy into one giant force of nature he's going to battle everybody with. And it shows him reaching out to Zamaron and to Maltus, the Helix, which is the base of the controllers, their home base, and Odom, of all planets, was targeted. And I thought it was such an odd choice because Odom was lost to the Reach way back in Green Lantern New Guardians. And the Green Lanterns the Blue Lanterns set up a new home on the planet Elpis back in Green Lantern Corps number 20. And then Relic came and completely destroyed the Blue Lantern Corps and Elpis in another issue of Green Lantern New Guardians. It was issue 23. So the Blue Lanterns have been long gone. We saw St. Walker show up in the Sinestro book. But I thought it was interesting that he would reach out to Odom because that really isn't the home of anything anymore, unless we know we've been through a number of cosmic events. History's been rewritten again and continuity has shifted back to something different. Odom is a base of some sort. But I thought it was interesting that they at least they referenced Odom, but I just thought it was odd. It was like, boy, that was kind of a weird call.
Or the fact that they can always fall back to the new trope that exists these days and call it a multiverse Odom.
Yeah, it's hard to say what they're doing with that, but I thought it was an interesting choice. I thought too the one thing I did like seeing was seeing Hal and Wally together, because given their history, we haven't really seen a whole lot of them together at all. Mm-hmm. So that was fun. But other than that, the one point that made me really kind of cringe was my eyes really rolled when Wally was saying to Hal that he likes the new kid. Because it's like Sam Humphries bringing Batman into the Green Lanterns series and trying to prop up and elevate the status of Jessica Cruz and Simon Baz by saying how much he approves of them and thinks they're great Green Lanterns. And so I thought, this is just his way of trying to make Jo look like something spectacular because Wally likes her.
I hadn't thought about it like that, but yeah, it's a good comment about it.
I hate when writers do that, where they like, well, hey, we got to make this character look legit, so we'll have them get endorsed by a character that everybody always loves and respects, and suddenly that makes them really cool too.
What baffles me is that a general part of the fandom that, like, and we'll use this as a example, knows that Hal and Barry have a unique friendship. They always have, and at the same time, no writer explores it, nor do they do any books about it.
No.
Or not anything recently, anyway. And to be quite honest with you, they don't have any interactions in Justice League anymore, because I don't even know what is happening with the Justice League, which, by the way, I think I'm going to pick up the first few issues that lead up to the death of, just to get some content going on what's moving forward. But, like, no writers do any, like a Flash Green Lantern team up anymore.
No, I mean, there's been a couple of appearances back and forth where they've appeared in each other's issues here and there, but not to any great extent. I mean, I think the last time there was really a lot of energy put into it was Blackest Night. Yeah. That was because Jeff Johns loves the Flash and Green Lantern. It was a great team up for that. I don't know, did you ever read the Brave and the Bold miniseries that Mark Waid did?
No, I think I read a couple issues of it, but I didn't stick with it.
That was pretty good. It was a good exploration of their characters together, and there's been little things here and there. But yeah, I always have felt like Barry and Hal deserve to have a lot more. And right now, Barry's not with the Justice League. I don't remember what the name of the group is that he's with, but he's with the group with Val Zod and off doing the other cosmic-y stuff. And I haven't really been keeping up with it, but Wally is in the current iteration of the Justice League, and that's who shows up with Hal. It implies that Hal's a part of the Justice League, but it could be just that he went and got them. Though this issue did do, other than being one giant battle and signing up for the final denouement, this book does do a few things. It sets things up for a new status quo. In this issue, Hal and Joe Mullane both lose their rings. Right. And Kelly's gauntlet goes to Joe Mullane, and after she gets done using it, it's gone. It disappears. So we've kind of gotten rid of the two special rings.
And then you got John.
Yep, but you got John showed up. So right now, John's the only specially special person. It was interesting that I thought it was nice that Thorne didn't ignore the continuity with the Grant Morrison series in that Hal was trying to use the Cosmic Grail to summon a new ring and to build a new ring and couldn't do it.
That was cool.
But it gets rid of all of the unique rings because Jessica Cruz doesn't have her unique ring anymore. She's now a part of the Sinestro Corps. So it kind of takes all of the unique stuff and puts all the Green Lanterns, other than John, back on the same page.
Yeah, maybe it's a reset. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, because we've always railed against the fact that, like the Gauntlet and there's all these other special rings. Joe Maline's got the special ring, blah, 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 this and that. I mean, wouldn't that be a complete surprisal on, like, the next iteration is a complete reset of the Green Lantern Corps moving forward, which, let's be quite honest with you, coming from a publishing perspective would not be a bad idea to do at this point.
No, not at all. It needs a reset. It really does.
Yeah, because you could potentially, number one, you're starting from scratch. You're building a new core. You can incorporate new characters while still maintaining the old ones and keeping your main ones, right? But you're also creating a new generation of readers that want to jump onto a team up kind of book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it all depends on how they choose to execute it. It'll be interesting. I mean, we still have the issue of there's no power battery. There's no central battery to work with. But we also have John with all of this energy. So will we get the very predictable, he's going to relight the battery and rebuild it himself? No, I don't know.
I got a theory. Maybe John sacrifices himself and becomes battery.
That's the other theory that I have been thinking about as well, because there's a line in this where Isak says that the source will exact a price from Jon Stewart. And we don't know really what he means by that, but is it going to be one of those things where John loses his life? Because I can't imagine that being a throwaway line, although we've had plenty of throwaway things in this run. I mean, where's Kyle and Guy in all of this? Are we going to get any resolution for them? Who knows? Thorne said he had plans for Kyle that involved putting them through quite the rough turn, but if the series is over, that's going to be a loose end that the next writer is going to have to either contend with or just write off with a quick gloss over. But at the same time, I mean, how would you? I can't see them doing anything with Jon Stewart that would take him off the table for future use. Right. I agree.
He's just too, man. He's just that's the diverse African American character that actually, to be quite honest with you, the DC needs at this point, and could use at this point, not for the sole purpose of diversity, but for the sole purpose of John's been an established main character in the DC universe for quite some time now, and it helps that he has an African American component to it, so they should utilize that. And I find it hard to believe he would die or anything.
Well, I mean, at one point they were going to kill him.
Do you really think they're going to pull that card with Jon Stewart?
I don't know. They were going to. That was, I don't know if you remember the story, but Joshua Hale Fialkov was going to be doing something, and he quit the book because he was told he was going to have to kill off Jon Stewart. It wouldn't surprise me either way, because they get more social media points with Joe Mullane than they get with Jon Stewart.
Oh, and also Joe Mullane is African American too, and she's also got a plus side bonus. She's a female, so. And
she's also bisexual. So.
And she's also bisexual, man. You got a true hit right there, man.
You in diversity bingo.
Yeah, yeah, you really do. And respectfully, it works.
No, right, yeah.
That's a component that fits in the society we live in. And hey, more power to it. Drive that. That needs to be driven anyway. But at the sacrifice of Jon Stewart, wouldn't that be something?
Yeah,
I'm okay with that.
I don't see it happening just because Thorne has gone on record so many times of saying that Jon should be the only Green Lantern. So I don't see him getting rid of Jon. I think it's going to be just Jon's going to use his energy and relight the power battery and go back to being normal.
Okay, so you hold on to that one. I'm going to go on to the Jon's going to sacrifice himself, become the battery, right? Then I'm going to take it a step further. Then they're going to do the reset. They're going to start a new Green Lantern Corps book, and then Jon's going to have his own book, but it's going to be an introspection into his mind of being a Green Lantern while he is the central power battery.
So your theory is that John is going to become the central power battery.
Yeah, he'll become the central power battery, and then there's gonna be a book about him, and it'll just be him being in the central power battery and how he deals with his own demons. Yeah. Some
people would get a charge out of it.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. I like that. Anyway, now, all joking aside, I'll be glad when issue 12 comes and goes.
Yep. And I have to give credit to the art team this time around. I've been very, very critical of Tom Rainey throughout this run. I felt that his artwork and Marco Santucci's artwork was probably the best it's been. I particularly dug the panel that opens up the book when you see Oa with Koyos's face kind of transposed over it, like Oa is his head.
Yeah.
I really like that, but for the most part, the art was good. So, despite the writing still being a little like, it was at least passable.
And another appearance by Naomi. She's really popular.
Yeah, I guess. I haven't really been following her at all, but, she's got her own CW show, so. But I didn't think the Justice League itself had a whole lot to do in this issue.
No, they kind of just were kind of like just like there. Besides Hawkman at the end, or Hawkgirl, Hawkman.
I couldn't tell because there's Thanagarians on OS, so I was trying to differentiate. Is this really Hawkman and or Hawkgirl, or are these just Thanagarians that are part of the United Planets force?
Oh, that could be too. Oh, it's a guy at the end. It's not a girl, so he's carrying. Isn't that Joe Mullane he's carrying? Yes. Yeah. Oh, and sadly, we didn't see Simon Bass.
No, not really. He really didn't. He goes. I think he's with the group when they go get their Iron Lantern suits on.
Whatever.
I just look at it as like, you got to be kidding me.
Okay, Simon. Good luck. All right, cool issue.
Whatever. Yeah. It was an okay issue. It wasn't great, but it wasn't awful.
Yeah, it wasn't terrible.
It was passable. There, I said something positive.
It was, but I still long for the old days of good Green Lantern stories, man. I just miss them. And how I can tell is where my temperature's at. Like when you read something, you want to be like, wow, and then you remember that issue. Like you were like, man, I remember when that, like Blackest Night, and I can remember issue after issue after issue and whatever. But like certain runs, they just don't have an impact on you, and you're just like, what happened in this issue? I don't even remember what took place. I got to read it like 2 or 3 times, or read it right before I'm going to talk about it, because I got to remember what took place, because it didn't have much of an impact on me.
Well, yeah, it ends up not only not being memorable, but like you don't care about it, like you're not enthused about it, like you don't, like if you're not excited for the next issue, then you're not connecting with the book.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and especially by issue 11.
Right. I mean, if you stuck around and you've dropped $55 so far, if you were only buying one copy of the issue and you weren't buying the variants, God bless you.
Yeah. But hey, for those fans that like this book, I mean, I hope they're getting what they want out of it. And that's the uniqueness about being fandoms, because our perceptions of this book aren't everybody's.
No, there are some people that love it.
Yeah, so and it's interesting to be like in their frame of mind, be like, okay, well, what is it that they like about it? Do they know anything about prior to it, or is it just a jumping off point for them, or whatever? There's so many variables. That's the interesting part about fandom.
Yeah,
I just don't like I don't like when people tread on each other so hard.
Well, there's something to be said that when a book is universally loved.
Yeah. And
it's been a while since we've had a universally loved Green Lantern book. I mean, there are people who hated the Morrison run.
Yeah, there was.
So it hasn't been. I mean, there are people that didn't like the Venditti run. So it's
ebb and flow. It's the comic book world. I mean, you just have to muscle your way through it. And sooner or later you get what you want. I mean, or you have to look back and And you also have to take into account that sometimes things hit at a different time. When I would do some rereadings of stuff I read before, it didn't have the same impact for me.
Yeah.
Like it did at the time when I read it. It just, and sometimes I battle that. It's like, oh, well, I probably won't read that anymore. And usually I don't. Usually you bring up an issue. It's like, oh, there's a trigger. I haven't read that one in 20 years.
My hopes for the Green Lantern mythos is that whatever comes next unifies the fandom a little bit more than divides it, because it's been divisive for a while now. And I don't know as if you'll ever make everybody happy. Certainly you won't with one book. That's for sure.
No, I mean, it takes time to build that trust with your fans. And I think that's overlooked so often because everybody automatically thinks that there should be some kind of instantaneous, like, payoff towards what they're getting. And that doesn't always work. And that's lightning in a bottle. I mean, sometimes when producers put stuff out, I mean, it's happened time again with movies, Every so often a movie will just hit at a certain time, man, with a certain group of people, and it'll just be just right. Other times it'll hit at a bad time, and it just won't have a good feel to it.
Yeah, you never know what different events and mindsets of people will converge at the same time to make something really popular and really resonate with people.
But I will go back to what you said about, the divisiveness of the Green Lantern, fandom. It would be cool to have a collective. Everybody gets not everybody gets what they want, because that's impossible. It doesn't ever happen. But at the same time, you have appearances by all your favorite characters under one book.
Yeah, or two.
Or two.
Or spread out amongst several. I mean, there was a time when we had that. We had...
Wait a minute, we're getting into Batman territory. No, that's 20, right? There were 20 books. Maybe, okay, I'll settle for 5 Green Lantern books then.
I think there's a path that gets most of people happy. Not all of them, but I think both of the Simon Baz fans won't be happy with it. But no. No, I think there's a way for most people to be happy, but it takes more than one book, because you know how it is there was a whole segment of fans that didn't buy the Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps book because it was Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps, not just the Green Lantern Corps.
Right. It took me a while to get into the Morrison run. I mean, it took me a few issues. Yeah. I usually know by issue 5 or I would say by 3 I have a general idea, and then by issue number 5 I'm definitely like, yeah, I know whether I actually like it or not, or if it's just meh.
It takes me about 3 usually. Like if I'm not engaged by the 3rd issue, I'm out.
Really? That's where you are? Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
But I'm tending now to give things a try, just for something different to read. But I'll be honest, my list of new books that I buy is dwindled a lot. I think I'm only buying miniseries at this point. I'm not buying any ongoing titles.
I took the liberty of checking out. I got it right here. I dabbled a little bit in the Action Comics because I'm reading about the Mongol thing, Mongol War, and then I want to read Justice League Incarnate. I have the 5 issues of that. I need to burn, and then like I said, the Justice League. I'm going to try the Justice League, and then I do the World of Krypton because Venditti's amazing. Dark Knights of Steel, and then the Vampire one.
Yeah.
And that's about it as far as my DC goes. My only other variant outside of that is I want to start reading King Conan.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and that's Marvel. So
cool.
That's my short list.
All right, my friend. Well, we've got a whole lot of listener feedback to listen to. My power ring is glowing rather brightly, so I think we need to take a quick break and come back and listen to some of this feedback.
Let's do it.
Listen up, Lanterns. It's time you took the oath with Green Lantern John Stewart. In brightest day, in blackest night, don't let the podcast of Oa escape your sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power. Green Lantern's light.
Green Lantern's Myron and Phil. We have 3 messages all referring to Green Lantern issue 10. I will play each one in succession. The first is from Mark, the second is from Jonathan, and the last is from Hewlett Verse Musings, the vidcast. Transmitting the 3 messages in 3, 2, 1.
I can appreciate where the author wants to take us to this dramatic, philosophical plane that contemplates the place Green Lanterns hold in the universe, but the writing and the art fall short of bringing us there. After issue 10, I think I'm done with GL for a while. I don't have the strength anymore. It's like DC wants me to hate them. DC in general is incredibly frustrating to be a fan of right now. Far Sector didn't show Jo being chosen via the selection process. She was given a self-replenishing ring, but readers never learned exactly why a Guardian would give her a specific, special ring outside of Jo's ability to live and operate with fear. I'm not sure if N.K. Jemisin left that plot point open on her own for someone to flesh out later, or if DC told her not to reveal a larger mystery outside of her self-contained story.
All right, Power Wing, thank you for grouping those 3 together. Mark and Jonathan, and we think it might be Donnie was the last one. He was using his multiverse musing, the vidcast login. Basically talking about issue number 10. And yeah, it's interesting. I think the listener feedback we get represents a good cross-section of the fandom. And really, there hasn't been a whole lot of people talking about the book that are really enthused about it. Some like it, some don't, but the ones that speak up are usually the ones that don't. I'm sorry people aren't getting a good experience with it. I know you and I have talked ad nauseum about what we think about this run, and it is what it is, right? And we'll move on, and maybe we'll get something new and different, or maybe we'll get more of the same. It depends on what DC decides. In terms of Jo, yeah, I don't know. You bring up a good point. Did N.K. Jemisin write this for somebody else to follow up on? I personally, this is just my opinion, not based on any facts, but the 1 or 2 interviews I read with N.K. Jemisin when she was launching Far Sector was she had made a comment that she didn't know a whole lot about Green Lantern, and so she was kind of making some things up that appealed to her. So I don't think there was ever any intent to really bring that character into DC proper, but with the success of the book, there was a compulsion to bring her there. But I don't know as if it was actually an intentional thing for her to actually ever explain about the ring.
And that would also be a good pivot into if this is going to be a reset following issue number 12, because then collectively you get your fandom back on board, because then you got people like you and I that know when it comes to the ring, it's usually, you are chosen, and that's how it's always been with the hardcore fandom. And to be quite honest with you, I don't know if it would be simpler to have that kind of model, to be chosen by the ring, or to have different types of rings that are unique and special. I mean, different writers do different things, but it would make sense why they would pivot that in, as far as going over and making a new type of book. That would be one way to do it if you're going to get everybody on board, if that's where they're going with everything. But as far as everybody else feels, and to go back to the points you made about people that are talking negatively about this book, I'll be quite honest with you, I don't troll enough blogs in my life, because I don't have time for it, to see what kind of high appraisals the book is getting. But at the same time, we have a lot of listeners out there. So, I don't think Myron sits here and picks out all the negative ones just to cast shade on a book, but I think he would include the really, really good ones that people do write in and write positive things about. But where are those people at? So that could be the temperature of how people feel about the book,
Sure. Or it could be people are writing in and responding because they agree, and people tend to do that more than want to be adversarial, right? I have not restricted any comments. I mean, we had that one episode. Remember the one person that was berating me and said, "I'm never going to listen to your show again." And I aired a comment. The person I don't think ever thought I would, but I did, because I want to be completely transparent. And I don't check out a lot of different websites. I check to measure the pulse of fandom. I look at Reddit. I look at comic book resources forums and the GreenLanternCorps.com forums to kind of see, well, that represents a good cross-section of the fandom. And by and large, it's been negative commentary, but I think that's also the nature of the beast in general, and that people tend not to write things that they praise unless it's made a headline or it's a love-in that happens sometimes. Most of the time, people are writing because they don't like something, not because they do like it.
But I will say this on that note, before we go on to the next caller. I do want our listeners to know that, if there are specific reasons, it doesn't even have to be specific ones, mind you, but like if you do like a book for whatever reasons, by all means, I want to know about those reasons, because like me and Myron are going to see things from not your point of view, but you may introduce something to me where I might say, that's a good point. I didn't really consider that. I overlooked it. It does make me look at it in a different way. It's always helpful to have that open-ended conversation when it comes to fandoms. And I'm totally open to people writing in and giving me some feedback on what they do like about the book.
Yeah. I've often wanted to, and that's part of the reason why I look to see what the temperature of fandom is, because I want to, if I'm not enjoying it, I'm trying to find out what other people would like about it. What are they getting out of it that I'm not getting? Because maybe I'm not looking at it the right way. So, like you said, it's a good exercise. So far, the commentary I've seen, what little commentary I've seen that have been positive, has been they're just happy to see Jon Stewart doing something.
And that's fair, because he is a popular character and he deserves that kind of panel time. And I get it; he deserves to have a book, to be quite honest with you. So, but like at the same time, I want to know. I want to know more about what fans think, especially if you're part of this Green Lantern fandom section that we are all a part of. It would be good to have more conversations like that, and I think it helps. Not only that, it helps boost the morale of us being fans, but also the character itself. Because if you have an open mind going in and talking to somebody about their likes and their dislikes, without somebody just jumping on it right away because that's how they roll. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like we lose conversation when we don't have an open-ended one.
Right. And it's difficult for this show in particular because you and I are very like-minded about our opinions of this book. So we don't have each other to bounce off. So we almost become our own little echo chamber. Right. But all right. Well, Power Ring, why don't you go ahead and give us the next message?
The next message is from Ken, who has some comments about the Carol Ferris spotlight from the last episode. Transmitting in 3, 2, 1.
Hi Myron and Phil, I'm sorry to hear about your COVID situation, but I'm glad you're feeling better. Thank you for answering my questions and responding to my complaints about the Thorn run. I'm sorry they were that negative. I just hate how selfish and petty Thorn has been with the franchise. Dismantling the 2 lanterns per sector system, revealing that the green energy isn't a part of the emotional spectrum after all, even though that makes no sense considering Blackest Night, and killing a bunch of beloved lanterns from the Johns era just feels like an aggressive spit in the face of the books that introduced me and millions of new fans to this mythos. Every time he does something like this, it feels like he's shooting himself in the foot. I split the rest of this email into sections so they don't get clustered together. On a lighter note, I wanted to respond to Chad's question about Carol Ferris, since that was actually something I was going to ask you about. With the Hal and Carol relationship, I love the great moments in New Frontier and pieces of the Johns run, such as in Secret Origins, which I argue would have made the movie 1,000 times better, but I don't feel like we ever really had an era where them being together was that important or honestly great, like Spider-Man and Mary Jane or Superman and Lois Lane. Venditti's New 52 run kind of ruined it for me when Carol abandoned Hal for Kyle, for no good reason, and GL 192 from the 80s just cemented how toxic their relationship has been, and how much a reboot can be a good thing. Seeing all of the many ups and downs of their relationship were overwhelming. The "Do I Love Hal" or Green Lantern bit is just too cheesy for me, and I'm utterly tired of the Star Sapphire making Carol's evil storylines. Unless Carol wears the Sapphire ring and works with Hal as lanterns, I want them to finally move on from each other. I would like it if Hal dated a Green Lantern who isn't a teenager or maybe a member of the Yellow or Red Lanterns? What if Hal dated a superhero from Earth so there was more reason for him to operate on Earth? There are so many stories you could do with Hal and Carol, but they feel like they are shackled to the same old plot lines. I like their relationship, but it needs to be less toxic and on and off for me to really care about it. Until then, I still prefer the relationships the other Lanterns have had. For me, John's marriage to Katma and Kyle's relationship with Jade, disregarding how it ended, are far better developed than Hal's. With your last video, I completely agree with you about the need for longevity and roles for the Green Lanterns. Ironically, I feel Kyle summarizes your argument in both ways. During his run, he was given his own rogues gallery, supporting characters, and development to stand on his own, which newer Lanterns haven't really gotten. But since Rebirth, and I really hate to admit it, he was an afterthought and kind of got lost amongst the other Lanterns. While he still had epic moments in the Sinestro Corps War and in the Tomasi run, he wasn't really that special versus the other Lanterns. I always think of Simon. It was such a disservice to his character not to give him a well-developed supporting cast and actually give him more than 4 issues to make his mark. Once Hal came back, Simon was pretty much completely forgotten and Jess was pretty much the same when Joe was created. While Kyle had almost 20 years and around 200 issues to establish a fan base and character, these new Lanterns don't get that. And when the number of GL books keeps decreasing while the number of new Human Lanterns grows, there isn't enough space for all of them to matter. My resolution would be to define the roles and responsibilities of the Human Lanterns. For example, John would be the leader of the Corps while Joe would be more of an investigator, solving mysteries across the universe. And I would establish different teams they can join. The Lanterns are too restricted to the League in my opinion. I would have Jessica or Kyle join the Titans while Simon joined the Suicide Squad in a Katana-style position, or have him hang out with Jason Todd. If there's only going to be one Lantern book, there should be other books for the Lanterns to join. Fun question relating to the longevity and roles of the Lanterns. If only 2 Lanterns could protect Earth/Sector 2814 and only one of them could be Hal or John, who would you choose? Myron, I know you would say just have Hal and call it a day, but consider how being the Sector Lantern could limit him from duties across the universe. For me, it would be interesting to see how Hal and Kyle would share responsibilities on Earth and the rest of Sector 2814. I imagine Kyle would focus more on Earth with the Titans and the League while Hal is more off-world, exploring other planets and sometimes coming to Earth in more serious situations. John would be the leader of the Corps while Guy was a trainer for new recruits, both operating on Oa/Mogo. Thank you again for listening to my email.
Hey Ken, thanks so much for your email. So I want to jump right into the whole conversation about Carol Ferris, because I think Ken makes a lot of really good points. And that, like a lot of those Silver Age female love interest characters, they were really just kind of meant to be somebody's girlfriend. They were never meant to be more than that. But when they made Carol a Star Sapphire, they kind of went in a direction that we really didn't see a whole lot of before. And I think they tried to make Carol more of a standalone character when they split Hal and Carol up, and Carol went completely bad versus being the Carol Ferris who didn't know she was possessed by the Star Sapphire and did bad things. You know, they tried to go that direction, and then they tried to make her more as a hero. But there's a lot that they could do with Carol that they don't, which is shocking or surprising, I guess, because she could be so much more than what she is. And I agree, in order for her to be on her own as a strong character, you kind of have to split Hal and Carol apart to do that. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's what they need to do for a while. I think they kind of did that when Venditti came in and he kind of sent Carol off to be with Kyle and the New Guardians, and she got to be her own character for a while. But I don't know why they don't do more with Carol in that regards.
I mean, she could be on a position up there just as equal to Mara, over in the Aquaman world.
Exactly.
And to be quite honest with you, if you want to push for strong diversity, I mean, why would you not endorse a fully functional character like Carol Ferris? Much the same as you did Lois Lane over in the Superman side. She's always been. I mean, even though she has a common connection to Clark Kent, Superman, it's never really mattered, because Lois Lane, since her inception, has always been her own character alongside Clark Kent and Superman. Mm-hmm. And she's always been the standalone, and I think a lot of times with Carol Ferris, and a lot of times where I think it's overlooked, is during that time you talked about with that repressive nature when the female was just the backup or whatnot. And, and Lois never had to endure that because unfortunately her character has always been written strong. Carol goes back and forth. So why not have a Carol Ferris driven book and have her lead the Star Sapphires? I mean, you'd have a whole book full of all your heroines. I mean, and it would be an amazing book. I know I'd be on board with it.
Well, yeah, and if you go back and you look at the history, Carol was kind of written as a very wishy-washy character. Like, first she loves this person, but then this person comes along and she loves that person instead. And you look at, as Ken points out, he mentions Kat Matui and Jade. They're far better developed characters than Carol Ferris is, because Carol has never been consistently written for long. It's always they love each other, then she's fickle and she dumps Hal, or she goes off and finds somebody else because somebody catches her eye. And it's a disservice to the character, because she could be so much more.
She could.
And I like his comments about Kyle. I think Kyle had the luxury of, with everything about the Green Lantern Corps being taken off the table after Emerald Twilight, Kyle had the luxury of starting fresh and having some of Hal's old villains in the beginning, but then because they didn't have the baggage of having to keep other Green Lantern characters around necessarily, because you had, that was when Alan Scott became Sentinel and Guy Gardner became Guy Gardner Warrior, and John was in a wheelchair for a good run of time, that Cal got to grow and establish himself, which is something none of the other characters really had. I mean, sure, John Stewart had, a starring role here and there in the Green Lantern book, and had some character development over in Mosaic, but there's so much of his baggage that's associated with Hal. So much of what he has is coming through the Green Lantern mythology, and it's Hal's villains. He doesn't have his own. He doesn't really have a supporting cast, which is unfortunate for that character. That Kyle really does have that. He had 200 issues or so to establish a fan base, as Ken says, and to get characters in a supporting cast that really none of the other Green Lantern characters have had a chance to do.
No, valid. It's true. And to be quite honest with you, I miss Kyle. I like him as a Green Lantern. And to be quite honest with you, when I read a lot of books in the 90s, that's where a lot of my introduction to the Green Lantern Corps began, and then of course I got more interested in Hal than Kyle, but needless to say, Kyle's always been a large part of what I've done. And so is John Stewart when I started reading or started watching the animated stuff.
So if you look at it, Ken's got an interesting question that he poses to us. If we could have two Green Lanterns to protect Earth, and only one of them could be Hal or John, who would you choose? And who would be the other one?
Well, we both know Hal would be both of ours, obviously. But as far as partnering up, I would go Jessica.
I like the idea of Kyle just because I felt that during the Venditti run, he established a really good dynamic between Hal and Kyle that I think could be very interesting and fun. But I could see Jessica as well. I think both of them are good. I like his thinking about John being the leader of the Corps and Guy taking over for Kilowog as the trainer. That's kind of an interesting idea.
That would be interesting to have Guy as a trainer.
And I could see keeping Kilowog as a trainer as well. I could see them both being trainers.
I could see Arkillo being a trainer.
Yeah, that would be interesting too. There's so many things that could be done with these characters that give them all a role. And yeah, it's hard because not all of them are going to be a starring role. Like if you had a main Green Lantern series and you had a Green Lantern Corps book, the Green Lantern Corps book is going to be shared amongst a number of characters. Mm-hmm. But I personally feel like if they did a Green Lantern Corps book and they did a Green Lantern book and then they did a Tales of the Green Lantern Corps book again that came out bi-monthly or quarterly or what have you, that focused on some of the other characters that we don't get to see enough of anymore, especially the alien characters, because the more human Green Lanterns we get, the more and more those alien characters just become background, which is, to me, it doesn't serve the mythology well.
Well, I mean, to be quite honest with you, if you did a Tales of the Green Lantern Corps book, I mean, you could isolate yourself in a way that you could tell two stories per one book,
mm-hmm.
And include a great portion of the Green Lantern Corps characters encapsulated within 12 issues. I mean, that you could easily do that. And then alongside that, like you had said, you'd run your how about this? Tales of the Green Lantern Corps recruits. And then alongside that, you run your main story arc. You'd have your big hitters over there. There's nothing wrong with that because that's just a proxy of your universe you're trying to build.
Yeah. The Green Lantern Corps, there's so much potential, there's so much there that could be done with this mythology that just isn't. And as a fan who's, you and I have lived through all of these different things that have happened, and to see what it can be and not be is frustrating as a fan.
Well, what's really sad is when the fans come up with more I don't know, bigger ideas and better ideas than some of the publishers do, and some of these writers do. And it's like, now I'm not saying it's bigger or better, but at the same time it's different, and it might be more well received because it hits on more notes than you are just by saying, I just want to write about John Stewart. I don't give a crap about any other Lantern,
Yeah. I think the whole Thorne thing has been very unfortunate. I think it was just, I don't know. There's things that could have been done. They could have left him be a writer if he just said, maybe I was wrong. But his ego is not going to it's not going to allow for that. And when you say
he might not even know he might not even know that people feel that way about him when it comes to it.
He knows.
Then maybe he's arrogant enough to know that it's just cannon fodder to me. And at the same time, and I'll look at his book and say, well, that was a year filler for whatever big was going to be coming next. Which is obviously Dark Crisis is where the focus is.
Yeah. I mean, I'll eventually go and buy them and fill in my run. Because and one thing I didn't mention in the beginning, I just picked up a copy of Green Lantern #1, which was such a high point. But I'm like 11 issues from filling in my Silver Age run. But then once I do that, I've got issues of the Kyle era that I don't have. I didn't buy Green Lanterns. I didn't buy Far Sector, and I'm not buying this run. I'll get them eventually. Right now, I can buy most of the Kyle era books, and there's some Guy Gardner Warrior books I'm missing. I can get most of those for like $1 an issue. And I think the Green Lanterns book is about in the same position, and this book will be too. I jokingly, sarcastically was saying that about this Thorne run that no dollar bin shall escape their sight. At some point I'll fill in my run because I'm a completionist, but I'll buy it on the secondhand market rather than tell DC I support the book. That's just the way I feel. Sure. DC only understands the dollars and cents, and if the completionist me has to stand aside for me to let DC know I'm not supportive of it, then that's what I do. I did it. It was really hard back in the day when Emerald Twilight came out. I gave Kyle about a year, and it just didn't resonate with me because I was at a different stage of my life than Kyle was. I couldn't find anything about the character that was interesting to me, and I already felt like I'd read this character. I already read Spider-Man, and Stan Lee and Steve Ditko did a much better job. But just for me personally, it didn't go there, and it was hard for me as a fan who was really, really, really emotionally invested with the mythology to walk away from it. Very hard for me to do. Right. But I did, and I came back, and I'll fill in those areas someday, and eventually I'll have a complete run from Showcase 22 all the way through, and it'll be complete. But
that's like a legacy collection.
Yeah.
Seriously, I want to get all the Kyle. I want to get the Kyle run. I'd like to own all of it at one point. I have a lot of issues to go, but at the same time, man, it's like you can find them. It's easy to find.
And now that there are shows again, it's getting easier and easier to find them.
Sure.
Because boy, I tell you, trying to fill in those old Silver Age issues right now, eBay prices are killing me. Oh my word, the prices on some of the books are just like 3 or 4 times book value, which not paying it.
Side note to that, I know we got to go on to the next email. I did pick up, or I did order an offshoot of the Blackest Night that was out, and it was called Weird Western Tales. And I never read it, and I came across it, and I was like, I never read that. And it's connected to the Blackest Night. I was like, yeah, I don't get that.
I think it was one of the prelude books.
Was it? Yeah. I never got it, so I wanted a copy of it. So, because I'm a big Jonah Hex fan, so I ordered it.
I was missing the Solomon Grundy prelude issue.
Yeah, that one's cool too.
Because when you and I'm going to be doing a video on it because I want to talk about Blackest Night and Brightest Day and what's the best way to read it if you're going to try to buy collected editions. And the sad thing is like those prelude books and stuff are not in any of the collected editions.
And that's sad because the Solomon Grundy one was I mean, it wasn't like earth shattering, but it's like it still connects things, you know.
Right. They
Still
do.
beat up.
They did the 10th anniversary edition. It's not in there. It's not in any of the collected individual books. It's not in the Jeff Johns omnibus. Did you remember seeing that big box set they did?
Yeah.
I have it. It's behind me over here, and they didn't put it in that either.
I don't know. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
That was actually part of the because I remember that whole entire run. I ended up finding it, and I was like, oh my God, I had to fill in all these issues because it was like 76 issues. I remember the number. That's how many I had uploaded to my iPad. And it was like 76 issues. And Solomon Grundy, it started with, that was the first one that I had. Because I had them numbered how to read them in order. And I followed it because I read all the filler issues and everything. Yeah, there's your box.
So listeners can't see this obviously, but Phil and I are video chatting on Skype, and I just brought over the Blackest Night, Brightest Day set. The packaging is great, but they also didn't for Brightest Day. They didn't put in any of the tie-ins.
That's ridiculous.
So for Blackest Night, all the tie-ins are there, but for Brightest Day they aren't. And then even for Blackest Night, it's not in reading order. So you've got a book with all the Green Lantern issues. You've got a book with all the Green Lantern Corps issues. So if you're trying to read the story as it was printed, you can't. You have to jump from book to book to book, which is crazy. Beautiful package, but other than that. But anyway, thanks so much for your email. We've got more to go. So Power Ring, why don't you go ahead and give us the next one?
Our next communication comes from Matt. Matt's a new listener who is wondering how opinions of some events from the past might have changed over time, such as the 2011 Green Lantern movie. Message commences in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, Myron and company. I wanted to write this email to let you know how much I've been enjoying the podcast. I have a bit of a long story, so bear with me, but I think it's an awesome one and you and others will enjoy it. I've collected comic books on and off throughout my life, but I've always mainly been a Marvel reader. I never found a strong point of connection within the DC universe, even though I greatly enjoyed superheroes and comics. I even tried to jump further into the rabbit hole through recommendations of friends and other fans, and just couldn't find anything to hook me. Well, one night on a whim I was very bored and decided to try again. I downloaded the digital app and was browsing through the library, more specifically their storyline section, where they collect arcs and events and such. I tried a couple and again couldn't get hooked. And eventually, I came across the rise of the Third Army. I had heard of the Green Lantern before through games like Injustice and the Justice League animated shows on Cartoon Network, but never read or knew a lot about the character. Almost immediately it became the point of connection I was looking for. I was so engrossed in that story and the characters that after finishing it, I looked up a reading list for the character and began reading the entire Jeff Johns run, starting with Secret Origin. I am presently starting the Rebirth era almost a year later. Well, almost. My reading list neglected to include Jessica Cruz's introduction, so I'm backtracking to read those JL issues. I've since fallen pretty hard into the character and lore, and I just think it's awesome that I was finally able to do so after so long of trying. Funnily enough, the Third Army depends a lot on the history to appreciate, since it deals with the shock of the Guardians' betrayal, and Hal and Sinestro are absent for most of it, and I had only ever heard of John besides those two. I think for me, it was kind of a dive into look how much depth and lore there is here that I was then interested in exploring. I also reread it when I got back to that point in the Johns run, to appreciate it more. As I began reading, I felt a desire to seek in-depth, intellectual conversation about the books, and that was how I discovered your podcast. I've since started from the very first one, and I recently finished episode 20 before deciding to send this email. Listening to you guys react to, what was at the time, real-time reactions to books and news and events as they were coming out, has closely mirrored my own dive into the character. So I intend to listen to all 204, at present, episodes, and email you periodically with how I'm enjoying them. I hope to be able to reach the end of this tunnel, and maybe hear this email or others read. To be able to make this more interactive, one thing I've found interesting about your early episodes has been being able to hear you guys react to things that are now more commonly considered failures, without the retrospective that often colors them that way. For example, the Ryan Reynolds movie is now considered the prime we're in on the joke for how bad this was material, even though it's not that bad. Likewise, The New 52 is now considered by most to have been a long-term failure, with issues of not being able to sustain their momentum and poor management. Having now heard your opinions of these things 9/10 years ago when they happened, could you speak on how you view them today? Thanks.
Hey, Matt. Thanks for the shout out. You had a lot to say, so let's get into it. First off, I want to say that, I reflect how you feel about, because I'm not a Marvel reader, and I've always invested my time over the course of my many years of reading into mainly the DC universe, and I've only dabbled in Marvel every once in a while. So it's tough to really jump over because you get there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of characters, and you don't know what you're going to like, so you kind of maintain yourself with what you've always known and what you've always grown accustomed to. So you stay with it for the long time. So I know how you feel about jumping over, but you did, and that's the name of the game, right, Myron?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I think I might have shared this story in a previous episode, but when I was growing up, my family was not very well to do at all, and lots of times I didn't have money to buy comics, and I was often very sick as a kid because of my birth defect, and so my mom and dad would try to find comics, and they used to be able to buy in some of the convenience stores polybagged comics, and there'd be like 4 or 5 comics in a bag for like 30 cents, 40 cents.
Yeah.
And they didn't have covers on them. So that was a lot of my introduction to comics, was reading these coverless books that, you would know what was in the outside ends. You know what the 2 back and front ones are. And they were usually like Spider-Man and Batman and Superman and the really popular characters, but you never knew what was in the middle. And that was how I had most of my reading experiences. And a lot of them were Spider-Man comics. So I really grew up reading a lot of Spider-Man and Marvel books, and a lot of DC books. And it wasn't until my sister in her high school years had a boyfriend who had a huge comic collection, and he gave them to me when he and my sister broke up, because he knew how much I loved comic books, and he gave me a ton of them. And it had the death of Gwen Stacy, the death of the Green Goblin, that whole run. And that whole section of the run, and a number of books which were worth quite a bit of money now. I think he probably kicks himself if he knows what he gave up. But that was how I got into comics myself. I was reading everything, and stupid thing was as a kid, I didn't realize there was really a difference between Marvel and DC because I didn't have the covers.
Yeah, well, and not only that, like, there wasn't such a big division as there is in later years of reading too. I mean, it's almost like I liken the comic book industry to like how the wrestling industry worked. You had all these different factions of people that were writing different kinds of books, and then slowly everything started to get encapsulated into one or the other, and then it gained momentum, and then of course coming out of that, you had your DC, and then you had your Marvel,
Yeah.
And then came your independent phase, coming up. Shooting up in the 90s, that's when all your little indie projects started popping up everywhere.
And kudos to Matt for he's listening to all of the episodes. He started from the very beginning, which I greatly appreciate, and I hope you find
it's really cool.
I hope that it enhances your fan experience. I really do. But he asks an interesting question about how he's experiencing commentary in the podcast. Like, for example, the very first episode was Bill and I talking about the Ryan Reynolds movie. And so he's experiencing what we felt like back in 2011 to talk about this film. Whereas now when we talk about the film through the lens of hindsight, we think about it maybe a little bit differently. So I don't know how I view the things differently now. I mean, I feel like I still enjoy the Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern movie. I'm disappointed in the fact that it didn't live up to what it could have been. I don't think it was bad, but I do think that it could have. It didn't live up to its potential. I'll just put it that way.
And it's also safe to remember that there's a lot. There's worse off movies than the Green Lantern one.
Yeah, I mean
Catwoman.
The Jonah Hex movie, because we were just talking about Jonah Hex a little bit ago. That wasn't very good either. I liked the Green Lantern movie better than I liked that first Thor movie that came out around the same time.
I will say I like Jonah Hex more than I liked some of these. So
yeah,
I'm a big Jonah Hex fan.
It wasn't horrible, but It didn't grab me, but I've always liked Jonah Hex as well, but I've never been a huge fan. But it didn't grab me, but it didn't disappoint me either. I find that when I go into, I actually enjoy comic book movies when I don't know anything about the characters, because I go in with zero expectations.
And that's the way to do it. And it always goes back to what movies used to be like. You get one trailer, and then like a year later, the movie came out. You went and saw it. And that's the way it was. I mean, now Star Wars fans get 3 trailers and promo spots throughout the whole entire time of filming.
And then the plot leaks before they go to see it, so they already know what the movie's about before they get there.
Right. I mean, so it's like, it's a vicious cycle, man.
I mean, nobody knows the pain that we went through when The Empire Strikes Back came out, and we find out that Luke was the son of Darth Vader, and Han Solo's frozen in carbonite, and we had to wait how long before we got the 3rd installment with no information in between?
Right. No spoilers.
Right.
And there was no, caught on set. No, that crap didn't exist, right? I mean, that stuff just, no. You saw a trailer spot, if you were lucky too, mind you, because keep in mind back then that your public broadcasting, you didn't know what commercial you were going to get. I mean, you got rando commercials. So if you saw a trailer, you could watch that channel for like the next 3 days, and you may not see that trailer again. You might have to jump to another station.
Like, we couldn't go to the internet and stream it on YouTube and dissect it and pick it apart. And that didn't happen. And the only time you saw any coverage is if Good Morning America or Entertainment Tonight covered it.
Yeah. Or a big news industry.
Yeah.
Like I remember back in the early days of wrestling, I used to hope and pray that some of my local sports news channels would do wrestling things in their sports, but sadly they never did.
Or we had to read about it in a magazine.
Or in a magazine, yeah. I'm going to check the stats on this game right now. Instantaneous is the way it is now.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Nobody wants to wait anymore.
So the other thing that Matt brings up is the New 52 and how we view New 52 now. And Phil, looking back on the New 52, what is your hindsight is 2020 view on New 52?
I generally liked it. I didn't think it was as bad as what some people make it out to be. I always felt like, I always feel this way with DC, unfortunately, I felt like it could have been better, but then again, I only invested myself in some of the characters during that run. I liked the Green Lantern run. I enjoyed it. I mean, it was fine with me. It's nothing like what I'm feeling now with the Thorn run. I can tell you that much.
It's interesting as a Green Lantern fan. The New 52 really didn't have a whole lot of impact on Green Lantern. Green Lantern and Batman were 2 characters that were in really popular runs at the time, so DC really didn't touch them with the New 52.
Sure. That's probably why it was just, I liked it.
I really bought into some of the stuff. I liked the idea of New 52, but I don't think they went as far as they should have. I think they made some creative blunders, which, a big undertaking like this, there's always going to be something that doesn't set well with fans.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, I agree with you. I kind of like New 52. I really liked the idea of it. I didn't like the Superman with jeans. That whole look didn't do it for me.
Some of it I looked at as in, being creative is one thing, changing the whole perception of a character is an entirely different, conversation to have. But trying things out is also like when Wonder Woman, when they changed Wonder Woman's outfit and it was more that gladiatorial looking thing or whatnot. I think it was David Finch was writing the book at the time. Anyway, I didn't mind the experimentation with it because it was a different person's take on a character. I don't like the ridiculousness of when people get down to the arguments of, well, should Superman have red trunks or not? Dude, grow up. Come on. I mean, can we have a better conversation than whether he should have red trunks or not? The jeans, you knew the jeans wasn't going to last. It's kind of like the Superboy thing when he wore that leather coat all the time back in the 90s.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It came and went. I mean, it was a different perception of the character.
I think
Supergirl's gone through a lot of changes too.
The only thing as a Green Lantern fan that I didn't like about New 52 was how Hal was portrayed in the Justice League. Because it was so out of character with the version of Hal that we saw Jeff Johns write in Secret Origin.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that before. I think that was one of your... I think I do remember you mentioning that.
So I didn't care for that. I didn't like how Jeff Johns just kind of made him this impulsive character that didn't, Hal might appear impulsive, but he's not really that impulsive. But he just made him kind of, I don't know. To me, it was a little over the top.
Sure.
But anyway, Matt, thanks so much for being a part of the Blog of Oa and Podcast of Oa family, and we welcome you here. And we hope you enjoy the ride. I hope you enjoy listening to some of those episodes. I know that the only way you're going to hear this is when you eventually get to episode number 206. but just to forewarn you, when you get to the episode where I rant about the cancellation of the animated series, it was not my brightest moment. But...
It wasn't your brightest day, man. Come on.
No, it wasn't. Man, Giancarlo Volpe, the producer, one of the two producers on the show, he sent me the message on Twitter. He's like, "Man, I counted up all the bad words you said," and he had like what curse word and how many times they said it. He sent me a little tally list. It was pretty funny, but
that's cool. That's funny.
It was funny. But he loved the rant though. He goes, "You said everything I wanted to say, but I can't say."
Yeah. Yeah, they're strong-armed and not speaking their mind. That's what sucks.
Yep. So, Power Ring, go ahead and give us the next one.
The last message for this episode comes from JP. JP has a comment about Green Lantern Hal Jordan and Carol Ferris. Transmitting in 3, 2, 1.
I believe that Hal and Carol are together in the end. I agree that Hal Ladies Man along with the Cruel Guardians is written out of character and in my opinion the biggest missteps of the Johns run. But the worst thing is that those characteristics have stuck at least for now.
Hey JP, all right, we're jumping in on the Hal and Carol thing. I think that I had fun doing that at that episode, that Valentine's Day episode. But and it's interesting getting everybody's take on whether they think they should be together or not. And it'll go back to what I said earlier. It doesn't matter to me whether they're together or not. But I think it's important that Carol is a standalone character and doesn't have to be anchored by Hal, or vice versa.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they have a place together, but the problem is if you bring them together, how do they continue to exist in a story and maintain their? It's like in Moonlighting. When the two of them get together, you want them to get together, but then when they get together, it's not as good as when wanting them to get together.
Right.
And then how does the series survive having to devote energy to the relationship almost every episode? It's the same kind of thing. I do think that Hal and Carol get together in the end, but I think it continues to be the desire is stronger than the having. And I also agree with JP in terms of Hal's Lady Man image. That was one of the downsides to the Johns run. The Johns run was so popular that a lot of things that he did, that's what they view the character that way. And there's a meme that I see on social media where they talk about the different Green Lanterns and describe them in 2 words. And that for Hal, they say space himbo. And it's not, he really wasn't that way.
Let's be honest here. Kyle had a lot of girlfriends too, man.
Well, right. He's more of a himbo than Hal.
Yeah, he played the field a little bit.
Hal really wasn't that way. I think he only had 4 or 5. There's always that characterization, though, that Johns did with Hal when he's young and so on, that he's just jumping from girl to girl. And this was the way I kind of looked at the Jeff Johns run, is Johns really tried to make a point of the dynamic between Martin Jordan and his wife, and that Martin Jordan's, Hal's mom didn't react well to Martin dying, and he saw what Martin Jordan's career did and the impact it had on his relationship with his mom. That he didn't want to put himself, being a Green Lantern, he didn't want to put anybody else in the same position his mother was in. So he emotionally distances himself intentionally so that he doesn't have to get too close. But at the same time, he's got the same physical wants and desires we all have. So he's got to get satisfaction somewhere along the way. So that's what he does.
Mm-hmm. You're right.
And so Anyway, we've got more voicemails and more emails to go through, but I think we're going to call it good for now. But when we come back in a couple weeks, we will continue that. And you and I, my friend, have to figure out what we're going to talk about as a main topic next time because we've got no book. Have you read the Tales of the Green Lantern Corps miniseries from back in the day where they fight Krona?
I don't. Well, I'll just default to my same position. If I have, I don't remember.
All right. Well, why don't you and I talk off mic and we'll figure out what we're going to talk about next episode.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. So, my friends, we're going to wrap this up because we've been talking for about an hour and 15 minutes our time. And we'll be back in a couple weeks to talk about some more Green Lantern content. We don't know what it's going to be, but hopefully it will be entertaining and informative.
Love something. Maybe we should start posting like do what they do in the movie trailers and stuff, and just start posting like promos of what's coming, and just give like little like Easter eggs, like show a superimposed image of something, and nobody can see if they can figure out what it is.
If we really had our act together, we'd be more than one episode ahead, so that in this episode we could play a clip from the next episode. But I'm not that organized.
No, it's fair.
All right, my friends. Well, until next time, treat each other well, keep your power ring charged, and make every day your brightest day.
The Podcast of OA is the official podcast of the blog of OA and a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. Share your comments and questions by calling the show's voicemail line at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. You can send your emails to podcast@blogofoa.com. You can also find the Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA on Twitter and Facebook. Green Lantern and other related characters are the copyrighted property of DC Comics Incorporated and are used without permission. The Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA are fan productions and do not claim any ownership over the Green Lantern or any other copyrighted properties.